Sin originates from misperception. It is the misperception that you are the body, or that you are the mind. The animal man is barely sentient. He uses his thoughts and faculties toward the aim of immediate sensory gratification. In days gone by, this was a great survival mechanism, as food was scarce and opportunities for mating infrequent. Over millennia, this pattern etched itself deeply into the collective unconscious of humanity, becoming a habit that is the cause of untold suffering in the modern world. Now that resources are plentiful and the necessity of reproduction has been separated from the mechanical act of sex itself. Here we see the origin of many sins: greed, gluttony, lust. Just as a certain behavior that is appropriate for the toddler is inappropriate for the adult, so too these former survival mechanisms are now the cause of so much tumult. Moving above the level of animal, the rational man no longer associates himself with the body, but with the mind controlling it. This too is a misperception, but it is a subtler one, as mind stuff is so much subtler than matter. The rational man commits the same error as his animal brother. He has developed the faculties of thought, but does not use them to see through the illusion, only to gain better control of it. He uses the power of his mind for the gratification of the same desires as the animal man, but to a greater and more sophisticated degree. His intelligence grants him an edge over his perceived opponents in what he still believes is a contest for survival, when, should he put those faculties to their proper ends, he would discover he is surrounded by abundance, and there is no longer need for competition among anyone. It is this ancient habit that is the cause of humanity's iniquities. When more food is discarded daily by one country than 50 would need to feed their people in a year, one sees it is the sin of those with power that leads not only to their own damnation, but also to the damnation of others. Nearly 99% of the human species operates at or below this level, and so it is terminally sinful. It is the same with every belief we have about ourselves. Who we are is response. We are habits built up over our entire lives, and since those habits develop so gradually, we never see any of this happen, and so take for given that who we are now is who we have always been and who we shall always be. This belief that who we are is immutable is what we alchemists seek to uproot. For if we cannot change ourselves, we cannot eliminate the misperception, and will continue to sin just as the animal and rational men do. If we cannot change, then we are doomed. We are living with the illusion of free will, not its actuality, and then everything we do is utterly pointless. As Ecclesiastes says, all is vanity. But we have a way out, and that way is alchemy. The alchemist works to put that sin to good use, realizing that sin is unavoidable. Sublimation is turning what appears to be your greatest obstacle into your greatest asset. The human heart is always being rent in two by its desires, to perpetuate its own existence and to avoid all threats to its extinction. Death frees the soul from the bonds of this world of sin, and it is that freedom that the human heart rebels against, while the ego enshrines itself as the false god. The ego cannot allow itself to die and find final release, so it creates substitutes for God that it worships, most notably itself. The ego worships itself while projecting false gods outside itself to convince itself that it is not prideful, in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. We saw this when the serpent tempted the first humans. Whether historical or allegorical is inconsequential, as the temptation is one we all must face, as all of us eat from the tree of knowledge, as part of our own natural development. When the infant becomes aware of its condition as a separate entity, alone, isolated, in the world of sin, it becomes aware of death. It is troubled with the first intellectual terror, and by far the most profound. It is also the last terror to be overcome, as to do so one must overcome sin, and so overcome the ego itself. Once the ego is gone, there is no pride, no grasping, no sin, no terror. A freed soul. This is the completion of the magnum opus, the very purpose for which the philosopher's stone is to be created. But that is never the case, is it? No. Prideful men create the stone to feed their hunger. They seek the ultimate power to create the ultimate idol for which to worship in the place of God, the ego itself. And with that power they can rewrite creation in their own images, usurping God's power, recapitulating the original sin that saw Satan cast from heaven. Pride. Pride is the first, the most powerful, and the most dangerous sin. That is why humans need alchemy more than they will ever know. The fact that the stone exists, you might say, is an unfortunate one. However, there are no unfortunate facts. A fact is what it is, for better or worse. There are only unfortunate humans, dealing incorrectly with facts that they find disagreeable. It is the ego that, while trying to usurp the very power of God, making itself the ultimate victor, simultaneously draws its primary strength from fear of God's retribution, casting itself as the ultimate victim. In all its guises today, that is the driving force of human history. Everyone who is unsatisfied proclaims oneself the victim, while all those who succeed proclaim themselves as victors. But the human heart is hungry, and victory never satisfies. Unsatisfied, the victor once again claims victim status, and, seeking again to blackmail the universe, forever chasing after a prize it cannot win, the very destruction of the ego and the reunion with God. There is no rest for the wicked, and history is testament to that.